Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals. And we invite cool people on to help us, like Joe Rockey. Joe has created a series of real estate businesses starting in 2011. So he's a veteran. He's been around. In this industry, right? 97% of his competition fails in the first year. But now here we are, 2022, and he's still rocking along or rockying along.
Yeah.
He has also created, and he's going to talk to us about this today, the podcast called Father and Joe in 2017. And that podcast tries to reunite people with their relationship with God. And he believes that unification is essential for the society and for individuals to find harmony and peace. And I'm sure a lot of you would be right on there with Joe and agreeing with him. So Joe, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, it was a fun journey getting from working the 9 to 5 coming out of college, which I wish it would have just been a 9 to 5, quite frankly.
Yeah, right.
Maybe if it only was a 9 to 5, maybe I would still be doing it. But I came out of college with accounting and finance degree because the one thing that was taught to me was go and get a skill because you get paid with your skills. So I then, once that was in mind, was like, well, what skills are the most universal skills that I can have? And every company needs to know where their money is. That's basically what accounting is.
100%.
And they need to know how to get more money. And that's basically what financing is. But the best way to get more money is actually to sell stuff. Whatever your company is, it's built to sell something.
Yeah.
And every job I had from I was in high school on was in sales. And I got used to very early on when I was selling the Cutco for those people out there who have ever had a college kid come knock on your door and say, hey, we got a bunch of sharp knives and I'm a stranger. Let's hang out.
You better let me in.
Exactly. And then when we're done, tell me about all your friends. I'll let you do the same thing.
Yeah.
But long story short is I was good at that. And I got the taste of if I make a sale happen, I get paid what people who are doing minimum wage would basically take a month and a half to get. That being said, there's also the risk of me failing and all of this work I do and I get nothing for it. And to me, that mentality of it's all on you is something that our entire educational system is designed to avoid. So that is the uphill battle we all have before we start, from college or high school, college, you're all designed to funnel you into working for someone and being a good employee who might be able to climb the ladder, but might not, but never having the, how do we actually sell? And to me, selling and management together are probably the two most important skills you can have as running a business. Everything else is kind of nice and they all have their respective places. But at the end of the day, if you can't sell, you don't have a business. The bakery that lasts the longest isn't the one with the best cakes. It's the one that sells the most cakes.
Absolutely.
And that's what a lot of people mess up when they're starting their business. So there's a lot of people who go, I know how to make this product better. I know how to make this service better. And they get so focused on that. And they just assume if I had the best thing in the world, the rest of it will take care of itself, which is not how it works. That's one of the components of sales, which is having a product people want. Right. But people have to know about your product and they have to want your product. And those two other components are just as important as having the highest quality component, because there's
more important, right?
Oh yeah, because there's a segment of people out there that don't care about quality, especially if you're buying something for someone else. There's an analysis out there that says if you're spending your own money on something for yourself, you want to get it at the best price and at the best quality. If you're buying for someone your money for someone else, it's best price, quality is irrelevant. And if you're not using your money and it's not for you, you don't care about quality or the price. That's the argument why the government shouldn't be allowed to spend money, by the way.
Right, exactly.
So that's the key part of it, is that you can have the best price in the world, but not every buyer cares about price or quality. I mean, some situations they change upon themselves. So that's just kind of some high overview stuff that I have seen people make mistakes on when they're talking about how do I create and launch a business.
Yeah, absolutely. They just, if you build it, they will come mentality, which
Mhm.
doesn't actually work unless they know you're building it and they're excited about it. And, you can get them on board with the whole process, right? It's just,
Yeah, it might be a very quotable movie, but it's not the most profitable movie of all time. Its own motto proves itself that.
exactly. So how did you, I mean, when it comes to selling, I know a lot of people have this big sort of giant fear around selling, like, oh, what if they say no? What if they don't like me? Whatever. There's just a lot of mental blah blah that goes along with sales. Did you deal with any of that, or were you just a natural right out of the
Oh,
gate?
oh yeah, everyone deals with that. That's like whenever you learn to walk, you're going to do a header a lot of times. And
Right.
and for those who don't have children, that's what happens. They run full speed right into the side of a table, and if you think it's cool, they'll think it's cool. If you think it was the end of the world, they'll cry for a day. Um,
Right.
so that last component there, people brush off, but it's really important to have people around you that know that this is not going to be an overnight success
Yeah.
and that you are going to run into a lot of tables, and that's just a cost of doing business. So I've heard a comedian that was on Netflix and really kind of took off. His name's Joe Coy, for those who have seen him on Netflix. um, he would start off, he thought he had some real good stuff when he was starting off his stand-up career, and he would talk to these vets who took off, and he would say, it'll take 9, 11 years to really get this. And he would go, man, I'd rather them not lie to me and just tell me I was bad. And the reality is, it's not the case. You have to be able to go through these hurdles and learn to really understand yourself. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things that get in your head. And the way that I teach people to kind of overcome that objection is take yourself out of salesman mode and put yourself back into consumer mode. So, there are plenty of times that I have bought things in my life where I know I have spent more money on it by having Amazon send it to my house than it would if I would have gone and driven down to Best Buy and picked it up.
Yeah.
But it's the exact same product. So literally quality is irrelevant in this conversation. It was about the convenience of something that didn't have to do with the funding.
Right.
So most people only think of the money side of it because that's how you get paid as a salesperson. And it's important. I'm not trying to tell you to ignore the money part, but the fear that comes in your head from asking to be paid what you are worth, especially if you can make your own price tag, really gets people, and they'll undercut themselves a lot early. And the problem with that is that it actually self perpetuates the problem in two major ways. First, you accept something less than you should have, and you're diminishing yourself instantly. And second, you're now creating a precedent that your consumers might want and then they might want to have moving forward. So if you can see a tactic that many grocery stores do, a week before they know they're going to put a sale on ice cream, they actually raise the price of ice cream. So the advertised sales price is right back to where it was.
Yeah.
You can do stuff like that. And there's all kinds of creative ways to charge people nowadays, which I could do hours on by itself. But the concept being, once you know what you're worth, stick to it, even if it takes longer for that total amount of stream of income to come in. Find a way to make it so that you are paid what you want, and then work with your client about how to make it work for them. Because at the end of the day, most people want to do what they have, but they have this mentality of, I got to pay it all up front. And if it cost $1 million and I only got 75 grand in the bank, well, I can talk you into trying to maybe sell it to me for 75, or maybe I buy your $1 million product, but you get a percentage of the company in return.
Right.
And there's
Sound
stuff
creative.
like that exists that, yeah, you as the salesperson only get paid that 75 grand up front, but now you have a ticket that might turn into the next Microsoft and you're loaded for the rest of your life.
Right.
Just to give an example. So there's certainly ways to do it, but never undercut yourself. And that courage that steps up and was required to do that, that is going to vary from person to person based upon how well you can handle rejection. And when you're in the world of sales, you have to have that's just a requirement. You have to be able to handle rejection.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it isn't personal, right? People
Mm-mm.
don't, it's not you they're buying, even if it's your product, even if you are your product, right? And it's a coaching or something like that, they're still
Mhm.
not really rejecting you. But if you look at it like, how can I repackage this? How can I, you know, change the way I'm presenting it? How can I change the way I'm talking about it? Go back to the drawing board and just try to, because as you said, if you believe it's all about price and you just start cutting your price, you're also cutting that perception of value,
Mhm.
like there's no quality here. I'll just go get the cheapest coach I can have to help me grow my business. Well, what sense does that make, right?
Mhm.
So I can grow a
Yeah.
crappy business. Good idea.
Yeah, I mean, we use the word coaching now instead of consultants, but I've seen a lot of guys who are really great, and they go basically, if you want to, you're here because you have a problem. Like, you wouldn't be talking to me if you didn't. So here's the deal: to make sure that we're both invested in making this work, and I'm not just some door-to-door salesman. I'm getting a cut of your company, and that's going to be how we pay each other. You also are going to pay me, because you're going to have to get used to paying employees. So I'm going to just be on your payroll for a bit. But at the end of the day, when this is successful and you're really making your money, I'm going to have a cut of the action that we can then choose what to do with it. So that's a way of keeping your value there. Of saying, you walk into someone, especially if they think that they're a reasonably established company, and say, you want me, it's 25% of all of it before we even start. That's an expensive price tag for people to cut. And then you can enter into negotiations about how to do it. But it also lets you know real quick about who your client's going to be, about who you're about to coach, about how they think about stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in the world of sales, yeah, I mean, like I said, prerequisite is dealing with the pain of saying no, and being able to call again, to retry. And it also needs to be identified that not everyone's going to be your client, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
So many people are bad at prospecting, and I'm one of them. I got to start that's the part of this that I'm the absolute worst at. So in my various real estate businesses, I find partners who just do prospecting. I like being in the door, coming up with these types of solutions so I can buy houses and businesses, but I don't like doing the prospecting at all. It's not awesome. So, and most people are that, I mean, not most people, there are people that are that way. So they feel that they have to close every single deal, or basically every single deal, to make sure that they can make sure that all their sales are done, because they're not filling up the front end of their pipeline.
Right.
And unless your prospecting is so specific that you're going to be getting only the right type of fish, which is basically impossible, you can't have that mentality.
Right.
I mean, it's better to have, and this is why I don't believe in one done sessions for sales. I
Yeah.
believe in having multi, because you need to have a screening process, and you screen them out. You found out if you two are going to be a good fit for each other, and you let them walk away from that meeting with wonderment in their eyes. Like, whoa, obviously this doesn't work if you're a pizza place, but if you're selling something that's a long-term relationship type
Yeah.
product, whoa, like all of the potential that can have of going forward with this. And then in that first meeting, I don't talk about price. I let them know they're not going to like the price, but I don't ever talk about what it's going to be. So they have that notion as they're falling asleep and maybe dealing with some hurdles in the week in between our first meeting and our second meeting of, yeah, this is a real problem. He's going to come in. And then this is the part that salespeople don't get, but they're going to build a number in their head, or at least what they think it's going to cost in their head, that may or may not be what it actually is. And as you get more confident in your skin, you actually can ask that person, so how much do you think it's going to cost? And then, you just see, are they in the realm that you actually cost? Are they trying to undercut you, or have you already made so much value that you're worth more than you think you are? And it's a nice little check-in for yourself to see how well are you at through that first meeting, as well as your screening process. Am I getting people who think that I'm worth it or not? And it also gets you into, do I really want to move forward with this as my long-term client?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And how do you decide that? I mean, is it just like a kind of the connection, or if they feel like they're not listening to you? I mean, how do you have sort of a checklist, like this person's we're a good match, right?
Well, the first thing I do is I judge people, and that's apparently a bad thing for society nowadays, but I judge the hell out of people. An applicable way that this is with my business is that I deal with a lot is when I'm putting a tenant in place. And I do the first meeting is actually not in person. It's I show them a video of the property because there's certain needs that a tenant has that they just flat out, I need to have X amount of bedrooms. I want X amount of bathrooms. And not every property has them. And I don't want to show it to something that's going to be an instant no. So that is something I recommend for anyone who can kind of get your basics out there in a presentable, packageable way, especially if it's a quick digestion. Like if mine are mostly 5 to 10 minute videos, it's nothing complicated. It's me walking around with an iPhone. Like,
Yeah.
Because you can hide so much with pictures, but when you're there, you can present it. And I can also then spend an hour putting a voiceover over it and editing it. So that way they're hearing my voice, even though it's a one-way conversation, it's me getting my voice out there and they're becoming comfortable with it. So my first thing before I even take them to their properties, I make sure that they've watched the video. I'll ask them specific questions about it because that will put them in the spot where they're invested. And most tenants, and this is people, all people actually, whether you're selling to another business or an individual, have other decision makers involved, especially the more expensive that your product is. So I have a lot of people that will say, hey, not only did I watch it, my boyfriend watched it. We sent it over to his dad to see if he saw anything that was a problem. And I'll try to get as many of those people at the walkthrough as possible. And at the walkthrough itself, I'll be able to tell whether or not they were lying about whether or not they watched it, and whether or not it's something that they want. So you can just tell. You can't fake that. Like if you've either seen it or you haven't, and you do it to enough tenants, you've done enough showings, you just know life. So that being said, that's what I do, and that's how we screen them out. Take all of these extra showings I would have, and they're just gone. The video can be watched hundreds of times, and oftentimes it is. And those were all 100 times I would have to be at that house waiting for someone driving over there and blah, blah, blah. Now it's just, they click the link on YouTube. Cool. Yeah. Like I didn't have to be involved. YouTube's doing the heavy lifting. So that's another thing, that's a form of sales, but I've outsourced it in a sense. I've outsourced the physically having to be there, but I still broke down through technology a way to create a form of a relationship. Now, granted, it's a relationship with the product and not me per se, but it's still something that we all can do before we have our first conversation. So more so than a 30-second ad, but not enough that gives everything away. Because you can think about, I can look at a house, but it's different being in there. I actually smell it. I can feel the proportions of it around me. I drove to it, so I know what the neighborhood's like. So all of that stuff is me not giving the whole thing away, but it's enough to let them know if they actually want to walk in the front door. And I think that is a form of what I do, is the transition from prospecting to actually negotiating. That's important. And then when it comes time to price, I don't put prices up on my listings. Or if I do, they're vastly higher than what I would accept. Because some sites just require, like if you're on Zillow, you have to put a number in or they won't advertise it. But I normally put those up 25% higher. And sometimes I get blown away because people will still take it. We live in an economy now where people have to take it because the more shut down your state was, the less supply there was. And that's basic economics. But overall, let the people who are your clients, when you're allowed to make up your own price, kind of tell you what it is. Now, again, if you're working at McDonald's or selling pizza, you advertise your price and it kind of is what it is. But if you're in a spot where you can, which most of us are, create your own price. Don't be afraid to put it so high and burn a couple of prospects in the beginning as you're figuring out what it ought to be. It's better to miss long than to miss short.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You're not going to get more money from them when you say, oh, you know what? That guy down the street's got a similar place and he's asking more. And maybe I can raise my price now. No, not going to happen.
No, because normally it's a built-in thing. So that guy who's going down the street and fighting with you looked at what you're doing and is doing some form of a value add, even if it's a costly value add or not. See, that's the other way we can really make money as the owners, is figure out ways to make your value higher that's not economically hard. One of the easiest ways is actually with your payroll. Make your place people want to work, and they're coming to work for reasons other than just the paycheck. Obviously,
Right.
the paycheck matters, but they
Right.
want to be there for reasons more so than just what's the bottom line. Like, it's actually fun to be there.
Right.
Oh, now you're saving money before you even started.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's a cost for training people and stuff. So if you can retain those employees, then you're miles ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So how did all this, I'm curious how all the your initiatives with real estate and stuff like that, how did that transition into your podcast? Was that just like a passion project?
So the podcast, like I said, started in 17. And that was for those people who can't remember that far ago, which I get it. There's been a lot of
Well,
turmoil
that's
and
5 years. I mean,
COVID.
cut us
Yeah.
some slack here, Joe.
Yeah, no, I get it. But when it first started, um, at Trump just got elected, and basically the whole country divided into CNN or Fox people, and the whole country just kind of exploded. In reality, a lot of people just stepped away, and more people have stepped away since then. But there was this divide that was ever growing, and it has continued, of trying to put people into categories and groups, so therefore you don't need to listen to each other. And that's not the first time in human history that this little kernel of popcorn has exploded. Normally it does not work out very well at all. So one of the things, I always loved history and going through history of mankind, this isn't good. Like, guys, we need to be able to talk to each other and figure things out. So what entity has been around through long enough to see ups and downs of human history and survived, still is living on the other side of it? And my answer was the church. So I ended up talking with a priest. He does all kinds of podcasting and all that kind of stuff already. He's actually the number 2 person of the English language for teaching new priests. So he's incredibly knowledgeable about all of this. You think about the English language, that's not just America, but that's like
Right. Oh,
all of us.
absolutely.
So he gets called to the Vatican a lot. So long story short, we did that and trying to looking at what are things that we can do as ourselves as individually to make ourselves better. Because if you want to have a better neighbor next to you, make yourself a better neighbor.
Absolutely.
Because most people's default setting is just be a mirror. Some people are be a mirror with like 10% worse or 10% better, depending upon their predispositions. But it kind of all starts with mirroring. And that's how basically we all start relationships. And we just kind of go through each episode trying to do something tangible that will make yourself better. And at the end of the day, it makes yourself better in all capacities of life. People have this perception that I can be this way as a boss, I'll be this way as a spouse, I'll be this way as a parent, and thinking that you can isolate them. And that's not how it works in the long run. You might be able to do it for a short period of time, but inevitably you become what you are, and it mellows itself across all of it. So we really look at life experience of what's going on, what has gone on to us, what are those feelings that we have inside that we don't ever want to address ourselves, let alone have someone else talk about. And that's why people get this perception that I don't want to talk about Jesus and stuff, because that's all we're going to do. We're going to dwell on these bad things that I don't want to talk about, and we're not doing that. No, but no, that's not how we address this at all. We look at it as, life's about relationships. Yes, you need to figure out yourself and have a good relationship. And there's ways to do that in a way that doesn't have you explode, be scared, and, emotionally cut up. But, an easy basic one is, who is someone in your life that you used to have a good relationship with now, and for whatever reason, it's not the way it was. Maybe you guys just drifted apart over the years, or whatever. And what I tell people is, reach out to them with a call. Do it by the end of today, not text, not Facebook, but actually call them and just see what happens. Because rebuilding little things that you used to have and expanding relationships is how you make yourself better.
Yeah.
And you ultimately end up building up these little skills that most people don't think of in their day-to-day lives, but you actually end up building the virtues up, whether you realize it or not. And if you just take a look at four of the main ones: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Prudence is essentially becoming smarter, becoming more educated in what you're talking about. Well, it's a lot easier to be a better salesperson if you know your product and you know how it's going to apply to their life.
Right.
Um, and then in terms of justice, that is giving the right person the job because they are the right person. And, you know, that's how most businesses work, even though society likes to say it's not. Because, and just an aside on that, if everyone artificially said, I'm not going to hire someone because of some trait, eventually that another business would come around it, only hire those people. Like, say I don't want to hire people who are formerly in the Navy for whatever reason. I don't want anyone who was in the Navy. Eventually some business is going to come around and collect only the best people that were in the Navy because they're getting discriminated upon for whatever reason. And you will have a stronger business that will beat the one that rejected you. That's how capitalism works. So the better you are at something, the more they want you. If you're not wanted, that's because you're not good enough or not worth what you're bringing to the table. You might be outpricing yourself out of the market. You might not be as good as you think you are, which leads me to temperance. Temperance is knowing yourself and realizing you are not the end all be all. So a way that I tell people to get better at that, because most people would like, well, how do I get better at being humble or whatever? It's kind of an oxymoron. And the way I tell people to do it is over the next 14 days, only eat 12 times. And yes, it'll be painful and it'll be hard and all that stuff, but you'll realize that you have less violent outbursts with people. You're more tolerant of other people. And in general, it's just easier to deal with people. You learn that being hangry is not acceptable. And that people just need to grow up and become better. And that's all part of tolerance and making yourself better. I mean, do you really want to go to a boss's office that you know he's going to explode over the littlest thing? Or do you want to be able to know that we'll be able to work this out, whatever it is? And trust me, that creates a better workforce, and a better workforce that people want to be at. They will stay longer and oftentimes demand less money to be there because you're the place they want to be. Because most people don't have that. Most people will never be willing to sacrifice themselves because they've had this mentality coming up through the chain that whatever the boss tells me to do, I got to do it. Now I get to tell people what to do. Yay. And it's not good. So you look at those four, and then fortitude, saying what you need to say. You know, something comes inside your head that you just need to get it out somehow. This is something that really does affect salespeople a lot. You know, they're in the middle of a meeting, something is inking on them, like, I got to let this out, but you don't have the courage to do because of some made up reason in your head. And the majority of time, when you say that, it will help your sale. I just had that skill set is probably putting into words what people mean when they say you just got to do it. It's learning how to just say what is coming inside of you. And sometimes that's scary because sometimes you think this guy might be offended by it. But this cool thing with your subconscious and your eyes, what your eyes see, even though your eyes don't know you're seeing it, normally guides you to saying the right thing, whether you realize it or not. It's a cool thing with the way your mind works that I don't fully understand. I just know it works. So,
So just trust it and go with
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, sometimes you just got to follow, or all the time, if those seem like good hunches, you just got to follow them and, say what you think you got to say and do what you think you got to do, and just trust the process. Right.
Exactly. And it's not always going to work. It's just normally going to work. So you just
Yeah.
got to just know that there is the possibility of being wrong, as there is with all of life.
Of course, absolutely. There's always the possibility of being wrong, but
Mhm.
then you're going to learn how to say that differently, or, what made me say that in that way, or to that person at that moment in time. And maybe you could sort of learn from that, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
just all an evolution. You're not going to be perfect right out of the gate. So,
Yeah. What you described there is something that as business owners, and really as all people, we need to do that we're really bad at, which is take ourselves out of a situation and be able to look at it. You know, if this was
yeah,
just person A and person B, was what happened okay and acceptable, or was it not? And actually be critical of yourself. You know, so much of us just get into autopilot and never do this reevaluation, and they just get wherever they're at, they stay at and on that same trajectory. And that is a skill that's hard. But it's something that's necessary to be able to take yourself out of the situation and be like, hey, was this okay or not?
Yeah. And to, there's this thing called, revisionism, where you like replay what happened in your mind and you think, okay, what if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? And then you sort of can almost be practicing for the next time that situation comes around.
Absolutely. And to that note, that is a double-edged sword. And you just gave the very positive side of that, which I like. But the other part that needs to be noted is that the way our memories work, as we keep replaying it, playing those different variations, our mind remembers the one where we look the best. So especially when you're looking back in time, further and back in time,
right,
how two people's remembrance of a situation can be vastly different. And the likelihood is they're both wrong. So that's something to just keep in mind. It's just a fact of life. When you're going like, I remember back when, was that really how it was?
yeah.
And to those people who are really good at taking notes, that's a great skill. I never was that person, but there is a subset of people there that are, and that's a value of it, actually reading what it was like when it happened, because there's definitely a skill to writing down what happened and why, especially when you're training in new salespeople and bringing them in, to just write it out. It's one of the best things I tell people for training a sales force. Go on a call, write down not just what happened, but what you were feeling on the inside going into it. When they brought up this random conversation, did it throw you off? Were you unprepared for it? Was it like, I don't want to be with this person anymore? And we're all going to have different feelings like that throughout life, and they're okay, but we need to analyze them and say, what are we doing here?
Yeah, absolutely. And the more honest you can be with yourself, right? I mean, the more you can take the judgment out, but say, okay, that was interesting. Now what can I do better? What can I do differently? How did my feelings, kind of impact what happened and things like that? Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And so it's not that you don't recognize that you have those feelings or anything like that. It's how do I acknowledge, like, okay, this is here. I know I'm mad because I got in a fight before I left the house this morning. Am I bringing this into this interaction? And
Right.
am I able to factor it out? Or is what this person's saying completely reasonable and I should just let them have next week off? Like
Yeah.
whatever the case is,
Yeah.
look at it. Or at the same time, are they taking advantage of me just because they're trying to, which also happens.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
all of this is important life skills that you need to develop.
Definitely. So do you, I mean, in your life today, do you do that? Do you coach people and help them to be better, or consult with people to get them to be better at these
Yes,
skills?
I do. Most of it is to be honest, most of it comes out naturally, organically in the podcast, Father and Joe. It really does. It's just, even when we're talking about like, hey, this crazy guy in Russia decided to just start killing a bunch of people for no reason. Like, how should we feel about that? Now, do I have the ability to shove a bomb up Moscow? No. Do I have the ability to do any of that? No, but I can still think about, if I were in that situation, what would it be? Is it the right way to think about it? And,
Yeah.
having a priest there telling me when I'm wrong, which is often, it's important because, I don't make any of this stuff up. This is all what I'm feeling with any given moment. And, sometimes we're talking about some specific church thing every once in a while, but it's also, there's always ties it to how can it be implemented to my life. And we have been doing episodes for almost 300 episodes now we've recorded. They all haven't been released yet, but I have never had one where something from it got implemented into my business and or life and it made my life worse.
Yeah.
All of these things that are taught, they're universal. And sometimes people will put churchy words on them and sometimes they won't, but either way, they're guiding your actions to being the same thing. The hiring people based upon their merit and not based upon you being friends with them is important. That's how you build a business that actually can be successful. I'm not saying you shouldn't work with your friends, although you should never work with someone you can't fire. That is a fact.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to look into this and make sure that that it's going to be in line with the past. You want to have a company that's going to last 100 years, 50 years down the road. People are going to look at what you used to do. So if you're instinctually just hating everything that's longer than 10 minutes old, you can't make something built. You can't build something for life.
Right.
And also on that note, not liking someone's plan is not a plan. You have to recognize that too whenever you're trying to build something moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you hate my plan, that's not like, yeah, give me a solution. What's your idea, right? What's your great idea?
Exactly. And if you can teach your employees that that's okay to come up with other ideas and that they need to be willing to listening to, like, if every time I brought an idea to you, you were going to shoot me down and I wasn't getting any benefit for this, do you think I'm ever going to tell you another idea again?
No,
No.
of course.
So I mean, you need to figure out a way to say that was a stupid idea, but a way to massage it, maybe turn into something that could be positive, or figure out. All of us have our language in different relationships with our employees and coworkers of how to do that, and that's really what this whole thing comes down to, is building relationships. And oftentimes in sales, we have fear that I can't put an equal leverage on this relationship as if it were one of my personal ones. I feel that me as the salesperson, I have to take more on than my client. And that's really not what it is. I mean, my clients do almost all of the stuff that's liable for me. Like I would get sued or in trouble. I put it on my clients. I found out a legal and ethical way to do it, that most people cannot do because they don't want to have that model. But basically any business stream can do that. If you have a client that's not making the orders the way you want them, put it on them that they have to be. And also don't ever put yourself in a space where you can't fire a client. Don't become tailored to just one.
Yeah,
Have a multiple stream of there, because then you really do get yourself in trouble down the road later.
absolutely. Yeah, it's dangerous to have, more than, I would say more than 10% of your sales coming from one person. And what do you have a number for that, a guideline?
It depends upon where you're at in your growth stream. I mean, so I
Yeah,
mean,
right, true.
when you're mature, you want to definitely have it dissipated as small as possible. Um, but that being said, what Amazon has proven, I guess a couple of different economics of looking at eBay with this type of thing too, is the long tail approach. That what people get in trouble with is they don't want to have a lot of low end clients. They just want to focus on the big ones. But in eBay's case, more than 50% of the revenue is all the one-off stuff. Like
Yeah.
there's only one person in the world who wants this, and only one person who's selling this. So could you make a business around that? Well, I guess if it was, a multi-billion-dollar transaction, you could. But if it was just like a $6 paperclip, that because it was this one shade of yellow, like whatever. But it works if you're doing a lot of them. So being versatile, and that's one of the joys of eBay, is they don't say no to anything that gets listed, which in some ways is great. Buy a rock that says Jesus was here. you know so that's an important thing to recognize too. So many of us only want to hunt on the one size client, which is important to know where your bread and butter is,
Yeah,
but also don't think that's the only way you can create wealth and money. It might be a more efficient way, and it's always good to be more efficient, but it's not necessarily the only way.
yeah. Well, and in your example, like eBay, it's not as if they're stocking one paperclip for that client who's going to come along someday, right? They've got some random person who's also their client who's going to provide this other client with, and all they are is just a broker. So their
Exactly.
model works not
They
because they're
they
supplying.
outsource the responsibility to
Yeah,
both sides.
exactly.
Really, they just make sure that the money transfers. It's eBay is not responsible if the product gets sent to you
Exactly.
damaged or whatever. They put it on the two of you to figure life out.
Exactly.
And any business can do that. It's just when there's a problem arises, how do we deal with it? And do we feel that we are the only ones capable of fixing this problem and that we have to be that? Or are we going to trust other people in the pipeline to do it? Because
Right.
that's another thing that burns out, especially first time and starting business owners. They don't trust anyone. This was my baby. I came up with the idea. I don't want anyone else to touch it.
No one can do it as
And
good as me, right?
exactly. And
Right.
that's probably not true, first of all. But more importantly, you will kill yourself. Like, do you want to kill yourself for this and destroy the rest of your life?
Well, and if you don't kill yourself, your family will kill you. Right?
Yeah. Especially, I actually see it a lot in family-run businesses. When you're talking about transitioning from one of the one generation to the next, and because the first generation did everything forever when the times were hard, they know how to avoid hard times because they've been through them. But the new generation has no idea, and that essence can take itself into a lot of different forms. But that's why a lot of second generation businesses die, because they weren't there or allowed to be there in the room when stuff was going down.
Also the hunger, I think that, they don't have that hunger.
There's definitely a problem with inherited wealth. That's a completely different episode. Yeah.
It's a problem I wouldn't mind trying to deal with, but
Yes and no, but there is a study that shows that third generation wealth of any other group in the world, not just America, in suicide rates, it's astronomically high.
wow.
Because you were handed everything and you don't know how to build it, and you feel this overwhelming not being worthy.
Yeah.
It also does translate to it's just remarkable if you think about it. The same study is being proven for those who are multi-generational on a welfare, regardless of what city, state, or country it's in.
Yeah.
You get those same undertones, but you don't get it with people who are working themselves through life and building themselves up. Working and building something out of yourself, whether it be economical gain or relational gain, is essential for the human being. And taking that away because of privilege or because of society will allow it, ends up really hurting those people in one capacity or another. And it's an interesting problem that people having wealth, how to give it after you pass or as you're aging, that needs to be considered, that most people don't. They just assume giving their kids the money is the best thing. And I'm not saying don't. I mean, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying is that it's a psychological thing that as humans we all have built into us, and it's hard to truly understand.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So Joe, I mean, our time is just flying by here.
Yeah.
What advice would you have? Or first of all, is there any question you wish I would have asked you that we just haven't touched on? I know that we could talk for another 2 hours, but
Yeah. Well, I certainly I hope that I'm be able to correlate all of this to business owners as people are starting to come up and build wealth. I mean, obviously I haven't gotten into all the X's and O's because you really can't in one type of session like
of course.
this. But the one thing I'd like people to have as the takeaway from this is that life is all about building better relationships, and no part of your life is isolated from another. And sometimes, yes, your business, especially in the startup phases, will call for a lot of demanding, just as a new child does. You know, when my son was first born here, I was awake up until 1, and we had shifts for the 3 o'clock feeding. I don't do that anymore, but do I remember it? Yes. During that time, was I hanging out with my friends as much, and were me and my wife is having as many chats as we have in other times? No, but that's part of life. But what you need to make sure is that you are growing, and you're not constantly stuck in that phase where you're there until 1 and 2 in the morning working at it. You have to, and the ultimate way you do that is through trusting others. Build a compensation schedule that keeps them wanting to do what you want them to do, which in and of itself is incredibly tool of management that most people fail at. But it's an incredibly important thing to get people paid to do what you want them to do, and to evaluate them fairly and justly. Did you actually do what you were hauled to do, or is this just not the right fit for you? There's a lot of times people recognize, I want this guy to work for me, and we'll figure out how later. And that might work fine if you put them in the right spot at the beginning, but if you put them in the wrong spot, there could be a lot of growing pains and questioning and disconsent. So I recommend as quickly as possible, figure out if this is a good fit. If not, is it because the person's a bad fit or because they're doing the wrong role, and adjust their role, or find someone else. Yeah, you're going to eat those cost of training the person, and the more important, the excitement you had of someone's going to do part of this, so I'm not going to be there. But don't discourage. I mean, that's unfortunately a cost of doing business. Not everyone is going to do what they think they're able to do. And also, you're not always going to be able to describe the position the way that it's going to be in reality. Because that's another thing that can happen. You get so isolated one element of your business, you assume you know how the rest of your business works, but it doesn't. And it's amazing how small a business is when you can still start losing that handle. It really is.
Yeah, it's true. And I would add to the piece about, when you first hire someone is make sure that they're being incented to do what you actually want them to do, right?
Mhm.
You see that a lot in businesses where, the people are being, you're like, with the way you have this set up, they're actually in some way being rewarded for being stupid because you're taking things, giving them
Mhm.
less work and whatever. I mean, I'm sure you can think of a lot of examples when people are not encouraged and incented to do the things that you ultimately want them to do and that they would probably most enjoy. But
Yeah. Yeah. On that, I mean, and we look at why that happens. The easy way is to just give someone an hourly rate and call it a day. But that's the easy way, and you don't got to think about it. But if you'd sit back and spend a couple of extra hours, what do I really want this person to do, and how could I pay them for it? I've given this analogy before. Say you owned a hotel, and obviously you need to have your rooms cleaned, and you have a limited window, 11 to 3. You got to get them all cleaned so that the yesterday's people get kicked out and the new people can come in. So you can do it in a couple of ways. You can just pay people an hourly rate, show up, do what they can, and you're paying them what you pay them. Or you can have an evaluation system based upon two factors: how many rooms you get done, and to what quality of cleanliness did it achieve. And you have it very clear, who's going to be evaluating you when you get evaluated. And if you get X amount of rooms at an A rating, it's that times that equals your pay. So may they get done with the rooms faster and you end up paying them vastly more than the minimum wage? Yes. Is the gross amount of money out of your pocket that much different? No. Is the quality of your rooms way better? Yes. So
exactly.
that is not really a hard, complicated thing to process. Depending upon what state you live in, you might have to have some extra forms and deal with a lawyer for a little bit. But at the end of the day, what's actually happening is you've now incentivized your cleaning personnel to be better at it and to be faster at it. So then they can make just as much money and be there less time, which is what most employees want. And
Well, and plus they're probably going to feel a lot better about themselves because they know they're doing their best job.
and they're getting rewarded for it. So so
Exactly.
so they're having someone come in and say, you know, this is an A, this is a B, or whatever, and this is why. So tomorrow we can do better at it.
Yeah.
And then as we move on, it can be a very, it's something that most people think is not fulfilling work, but now you just turned it into an incentivized game. So if
Right.
I do better, I get paid more. If I do faster, I can go home faster. I'm not
Right.
paid to be here. I'm paid to get this done.
Right.
And that mentality shift is so huge for people. And it also makes you in the world of hiring, it makes you stand out so much. You're no longer fighting with just an hourly rate. What am I paid to do here versus some other mind-numbing skill? This is, I can do this, I can be way better off. And I can have more control of my life. Well, sign me up.
Well,
And
and you're going to get the better people too, because the people
Mhm.
who are getting all C's and D's and getting and making no money, they're just naturally going to want to leave.
Exactly. They'll phase themselves out, and
Yep.
the ones who are successful will stay. And now you have a motivated workforce for that specific task.
Yep.
And then, you figure out how to correlate every task to that. And just how can I do that?
Yep.
You don't pay people per hour they're sitting on the roof. You pay them per shingle that they put down correctly. Well, guess what's going to happen? Your crew is going to be faster and more efficient.
Right.
And that's a big part of it. Like when I do my flips, I don't pay them hourly rate. I pay them based upon task. And it's amazing with how much better and faster things get done when there's bonuses and stuff like that involved. So
Definitely.
it's it's something that takes you more time as a business owner, really thinking about how to compensate these people, but it also makes it worthwhile more on the end, and it avoids a lot of problems down the road.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was trying to shut my fan off. It's cold, but it's not shutting off. So I don't know. It must be me having technology problems today with everything.
Oh, that's part of life.
So Joe, how can people get in touch with you? How can they find your podcast and reach out and work with you?
Yeah, so it's well, the podcast is Father and Joe, 3 words, Father and Joe, the way it sounds. You can find us on every single distribution site for audio podcasts. And that's the primary way. If people who want to get a hold of me on a professional basis, I have a screening service for our email, which is at 412homes@gmail.com. 412 is not creative, it is the area code for Pittsburgh. 412homes@gmail.com.
Excellent. Super. And thank you so much, Joe, for being with us today. I love talking with you. And like I said, I'm sure we could talk for another few hours, but we'll give people a break if they want.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Take a breath. And thank you so much, listener, for being with us today. I know you got something out of all that Joe's been sharing with us. So reach out to him, check out his podcast. It sounds like it's a really fun, interesting way of kind of thinking about what's happening in the world and what's happening with your own life. And be sure to be with us next week and see what we have in store for you. Have a super day.